All right, welcome back to the second half of Plain Talk. We sort of talked with Governor Armstrong a little bit off air about, you got to appreciate Governor Armstrong's willingness to you ask him a question and he answers the question with, I don't want to say no filter, but he doesn't have to worry about spinning because he just gives an honest answer. And it's what I really, really like about him.
Well, and he's also right. It helps to be right, right?
Yeah.
So since we're,
Yeah.
we're defining who's right, because we were talking before about you and I disagreeing a lot, and
Right.
I think you made the point about you being right. So I think Kelly's more like me then. So.
Yeah, well, I will tell you, like when you coming out of his first session and his two big legislative accomplishments are cell phone ban and even more so the property tax, those are big wins. Those are big policy changes. And this property tax thing, Pat, people are going to feel it big time once they get that $1,600.
I actually believe that if done right, we could get to a point where we can eliminate property taxes using oil revenue, but in a way that's self-sustaining as opposed to just throw it all at it now. You're right. This is a big idea that people haven't really got their hands around yet. And I know that there are people that, the commercial side didn't get any, or we should have just done away with it. This is a big win for Kelly, but it's a big win for homeowners across North Dakota. I saw an estimate the other day that a third of homeowners in North Dakota would see their property taxes completely done away with as a result of this legislation.
How you think about those rural homeowners whose values of their homes aren't that much. I would guess a majority of people in rural communities are going to be paying nothing in property taxes. So rather than having an initiated measure by Rick Becker that just says, let's get rid of none of that or all property taxes without a plan, we can get there. I'm left of center. I obviously was very much against this property tax measure, not because I love property taxes. I would much rather people get taxed in a more progressive way than based on their property tax. But when there's no plan, it doesn't work. So,
the other thing I love about this approach that they took to this is using the legacy fund. The legacy fund was established to provide some sort of enduring effect for the people of North Dakota from the God-given resources that we have in energy, and especially in oil and natural gas. And so we created this fund, and there's been a lot of talk about how to do it, workforce development, all these things. I have yet to see until this bill a proposal that truly lives up to the promise of the legacy fund. Think of this. You're talking about generations that will have their property taxes reduced or eliminated because of what the oil industry and the oil and resource in this state has done. And you're talking about the potential to affect it for generations because we're using the earnings, not the principal. But I mean, that to me is the definition of legacy.
right. And on top of that, I mean, the 3% cap, I think anybody who was paying attention at all to the legislature going in, we were going to get a cap. I mean, when Kelly Armstrong wants a cap, the majority leaders want a cap, the Democrat leaders want a cap, you're going to get a cap. So the people up in Minot who are attacking the League of Cities because League of Cities didn't push hard enough against a cap, those are people who wanted to eliminate property taxes. And now they're just mad still about Measure 4. And they're trying to punish League of Cities. But League of Cities was advocating for their members, who you also just pointed out were all over the place on the cap. I mean, you got Schmitz, you got Wojcinski and others who actually supported it.
Well, and the bottom line is what we learned from going back even to the Hoeven plan, the first dollars that went into property tax buy down, was that in the absence of a cap, those dollars got consumed through growth. Then they got backfilled on, and so that just putting money into it isn't enough. You have to have some way to do that. But I thought wisely, the legislature gave you a vehicle to go back to the people and say, okay, we really have a need. Now we know that that's hard. I mean, look at how hard it is to build schools using measures at the local level. But at the same time, if you make your case, we also see from that very example that it can be done if you have the need. So,
well, and I think the governor also pointed out several times it's tax policy. We never don't dabble with tax policy. the 3% cap isn't the right cap, or different political subs maybe have, because I think there is an issue with medium-sized cities and how does that work? I mean, bigger cities I think work. But I think the cap also is good because we've had situations in the past where a city keeps property taxes down, a school keeps property taxes down, and the county shoots them up. The average taxpayer isn't looking line by line as to who to blame. They blame everybody when their property taxes go up. So it's a smart plan.
Well, and it's also not just, the county versus the local or vice versa. It's also from one school, the one school system, one city to another. You have some cities that have been very good about restricting their tax growth and prudent with the money that they spend. And then you have others that aren't. I mean, that's kind of what the price that Fargo's paying right now, right?
I agree.
They're kind of in a bind because they've had a lot of excess in that budget that other cities and counties don't have. And now all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, now we have to be fiscally responsible because they could raise taxes without any kind of input from the people, even beyond what valuation or organic growth would be. So there'll be an accountability. And that's the word that I think we have to use here. It's not that good or bad. It's the accountability that matters. And that's what this is going to bring is accountability. Everyone's going to have to be tough on their budgets and then make the case with their people. And ultimately the voters will hold them accountable, yay or nay.
Yeah, and you still have the folks that were supporting the elimination of property taxes saying that the governor and the legislature didn't do enough. I mean, we had the state GOP who censured the governor for supporting a bill that only got 4 votes against it. I mean, sort of, missing something there. Again, when people start seeing that $1,600, there's going to be a lot of happy property tax owners.
Well, and let's be honest we talked earlier in our discussions about how the political landscape has changed, and there is where the success that Schaefer and Hoeven had in terms of building their political party in North Dakota came because the people were with them. Everybody agreed that jobs was the number one issue. As we move into this anti-government populist kind of phase with some people, there's still, I believe the majority look like Ed Schaefer, not perhaps some of the new voices, but you're seeing that play out in like party politics because, of course, in small groups, it's easier to take control of things. And the fact that they would censure the governor for something that was so widely popular, not only with the general public, but with Republicans, shows you how out of touch that crowd can be.
I'm going to go slightly off topic here because I think you set up something I want to ask you about. So you're a guy who's been involved in GOP political politics over the years. I mean, state conventions, the state of the state GOP party. If you're Kelly Armstrong, if you're Julie Fedorchak, if you're John Hoeven, do you just ignore the state party? I mean, if you're let's say Kelly Armstrong specifically, why should Kelly Armstrong is much bigger, much more important than the state GOP. They need him more than he needs them. What does this look like, that relationship moving forward?
Well, I think everybody's going to have a different environment depending upon, what you're in. I don't think there's one size fits all for any of these, right? I mean, let's be honest. If that happened, then Gary Nelson would have been the nominee when Ed won, right? Because, I think everybody has to pursue their own whatever works best for them. And that's the same thing for Kelly. I mean, Kelly said it best is he didn't really care about the censure because, of course, the people were with him, right? But every situation is going to be different, and that's going to play out. It'll be an interesting as we enter term limits, even more so in this next election. It's going to be fascinating to see. And I encourage people ask me all the time, well, should I go to the state convention? Should I go to the district convention? And run as a candidate. And I tell everybody the same thing. Do what works best for you. We have a wonderful system in this state and in this country. You can go to a district convention and run for the legislature or try to get the nomination for, governor or whatever. And then if you don't like the outcome there, you can go to the primary. And every time along this step, whether it's the local party or the state party, or then, of course, the statewide primary, you have an opportunity to involve more and more people in that process. And as a result, I think ultimately we end up with, on average, the best candidates and the best people in those jobs. But it is something that everybody has to decide for themselves of what's the best path. There is no wrong path. Kevin Cramer, when he skipped the convention, made the right decision. Just like John Hoeven, when he went to the convention in 2000, and again, just the last time he ran, made the right decision because they were right for him in that situation. And I think that applies to anybody coming down the pike in this, because that's how we get the best candidates and make the best decisions.
One of the things that makes me a little bit nervous is I often hear like traditional Republicans who are being recruited to run for office who say, I don't want to go to the convention. It's a scary thing. And, because it's not a welcoming environment. And part of that's the Big Tent, right? I mean, Democrats would welcome having hundreds of people, right?
Right.
But so if you're trying to get somebody like a normie Republican, a pro-business Republican, to run in this environment, it's a big ask these days. But we've also seen like District 30 when Mike Nathan, Glenn Bosch, and Diane Larson skipped the district convention and just went straight to the primary. I think that made the three of them better legislators because they had to go and knock on doors and talk to the voters in a district that historically has not been competitive. But I do worry that if we put too much emphasis on the district conventions as the only path, that you keep some people out of the process. So I do like what you're saying there, that whatever works best for you, you don't have to go to the convention. You can go straight to the primary.
Because in the end, it's the people we put up through that final piece of that process that matter, and they're the ones that go to November and run for election. But that's my point, is exactly that, is every situation is going to be different. We have all kinds of vehicles to get people into the process. And if quite frankly, I understand why some people say, I don't want to be part of the state convention. I don't want to be, because they have become a churn, to say it as softly as I can. But at the same time, for some, it's ideal. And again, that puts more people into play. And at the end of the day, more people to choose from, and we get better candidates. But I don't think there's anything that says you have to go through the convention. Now, remember, there has been an attempt by both sides to restrict the other option. There have been people that wanted to do away with the ability of the district conventions to be a source for candidates, and there are those that wanted to eliminate the primary, even to the presidential level in North Dakota. So, I mean, I'm thinking Curly Hauglund and his efforts to eliminate the national primary. Every time you shrink the pool and cut the ways that people can go to get to that final November election, you reduce the competency and the quality of the candidates. That's one of the things I love about our process, is that people can find the best way for them to get on the ballot in November, and that gives us the best choices in terms of that final test.
But it's also really interesting to me. You talk about both sides have tried to do it. The group of folks who are like, it's a smoke-filled back room. That's where all the decisions are being made. And then all of a sudden they've got control of the party system. And they're like, I love this back room. And we saw it up in District 42 when Dustin McNally got appointed, and Brandon Pritchard and others were trying to determine who truly was, or who could vote and who couldn't vote at the district convention. It's an open process, as long because that wing of people will use whatever system works best for them, right? To get what they want.
Which is part of the process, is part of,
right,
of how the system works. The thing that we have to be careful of is putting in place restrictions. I talked to Shane Gettle, who for a long time national committee person, parliamentarian, about exactly what went on in 42. And every district has the freedom to set up the rules that they want to set up. Now, you will probably see as a result of that, some of the more conservative or populist districts try to change the rules so that they can restrict the participants. That's absolutely the wrong thing to do. Absolutely the wrong thing to do. We have got to leave it be an open process. And Republicans have succeeded when the tent is big. And of course, the people that want to shrink this down like to say, well, it's too big. There's too many opinions who I don't like. The reality is that in North Dakota, heck, there's not that much difference between Democrats and Republicans, much less the wings of the party when it comes right down to it. And the more people we have in that process, the better off we all are.
So I think it's interesting you said conservative and then corrected yourself with populist, because I do think the folks who sort of fancy themselves as the conservatives in North Dakota Republican politics, in fact, are not conservative. When you look at traditional size of government, role of government, they're anything but conservative. Like how do the traditional Republicans take back the GNDC scorecard?
Right.
That's sort of when I think about true conservatives, limited government, that kind of thing. I think about that scorecard. I don't think about the people who are banning books or doing all the other stuff that some of the populist folks do.
Well, and that's an advent of kind of a modern day advent of the social issues that have weighed in on that. Unfortunately, it means that we're not as focused. Of course, I think part of that's driven by the fact that we've been fat and happy a long time. And because of hard times will get you focused on the economy. And ultimately, that's where the voters live. So there might be some punishment down the road if we don't kind of turn the focus back. But you're absolutely right. You asked the important question: how do we make sure that we get back on the economy as our main driving force? That's called show up. Elections are not representative of the people. It's representative of the people who care enough to show up. And that's why my message, in whether it's the radio talk show I sub in sometimes or sitting in for Rob, is engage. Engage at the district convention, the state convention, or especially in the primaries, because fringes only succeed in low turnout environments. So if you're concerned about the fringes having too much power and control, make sure you show up.
Yep. No, I think that's absolutely right. Those who show up get to make the decisions. Hey, we sort of talked to the governor about this a little bit, but I know that you didn't love Rob Port's column saying the Kevin Kramer sort of started the government censoring conversation around Jimmy Kimmel. You want to just respond to that? Your thoughts on that?
Well, and I want to be clear. What I was doing was responding to Rob's characterization that Kevin was talking about things like Jimmy Kimmel. It wasn't it. It was the news media that he was responding to in 2016, 2018, and the bias that the national news media had against Republicans, and especially in the presidential election. There's a big difference between a comedian who does a talk show versus somebody who purports to be an unbiased news source using public airwaves. And I think Kelly even approached that a little bit, is that there is a difference there. Fox News doesn't count, for example, because Fox News is not on the public airwaves. But when you have a public enterprise, it'd be like saying, okay, we're going to have the governor or the capital distribute a newspaper that's biased, paid for with tax dollars. It's no different. It's public resources being applied in a biased and politically driven environment. And so that's what Kevin's point was. And I tend to agree that there is a higher standard that should be applied to newscasters in the public domain, which is what broadcast news is that there should be an obligation to have balance, at least balance, if not an unbiased, because they're using something that the public owns. Everything else off the table, and I don't think you can look at entertainment the same way. I think it was a mistake for Carr to say what he said. In fact, unfortunately, it probably is going to work against everybody's interest because this will just prolong. Now he's more of a celebrity than ever as a result of this. So yeah, I thought what he said was awful. I think the public would have punished him, and for even Trump to criticize Kimmel for what he said is not wrong. But when you threaten a license over something like that, that's the point where we might have crossed the line. Yeah. But that being said, when it comes back to news, I think we have to look at that differently. And I'm less concerned about that today than I am, as I point out, the whole social media impact. We have got to start putting in some ability twofold. One, to protect our children from misinformation and we have foreign actors who are trying to use our addiction to social media and alternative news sources, feeding that to try and undermine our country, our society and our country. We have to find out a way to do that. Might start with putting some limitations in how kids can access that, even though it may not be perfect. Still better than what we have. And I think we can hold some of these companies accountable, not for individual isolated cases. Because, like Kelly said, you can't have a game, some video game chat room where two people say something. You can't do that. But we can make sure that they're putting in place systems that will help guard against some of that stuff, and that they're actually working the system. I think they can be held accountable for that.
It is so interesting, listening to you talk about this, because, I mean, one of the things I think on the network television thing is who gets to decide what's bias, right? I mean, I mentioned earlier, too, I like talking to you because we have sort of a shared set of facts. That's not necessarily the case in today's world, that there's a shared set of facts. So we need to be careful on that. But also, you bringing up the gaming systems and the chat rooms. I mean, I have an 8-year-old son at my house who is, plays some video games. I think Aaron and I would both agree, probably more than he should be. But we have to monitor that, right? We don't know sort of what's being fed. And I can't remember if the 2020 presidential campaign no, maybe it's just the last one, that Kamala was advertising in some of these different gaming systems. Like, there's literally paid advertising within a game. It's a crazy way that we try to get in front of people. So interesting stuff.
No, absolutely. And I think we have to, first it starts with parents, grandparents in my case, but parents, it starts with us first, right? But that doesn't mean there aren't some things that are common sense. We don't allow kids to drink. We don't allow kids to see X-rated movies. We don't, all those things. There are some common sense kinds of things that we could do, while not perfect, would help the situation, and begins there. But also then to make sure that these companies put in place and execute on some parameters that prohibit out of country influences, radicalized, violent behaviors, all those things. I don't want to be able to go after Facebook because two kids came up, or two adults were talking back and forth about doing something untoward, or especially something violent. But at the same time, they should be required, just like we do with pharmaceutical drugs or any other products that you buy and sell in this country, have regulations to make sure that the public is safe in using them. Yep. Same here.
Yeah, I mean, it's tobacco, right? I mean, you and I have worked on some tobacco stuff in the past, and those safeguards. All right, we've gotten some
one thing on your point earlier, and then I'll let you go to the text messages. You talked about who decides. That's what the courts are for. We set up the laws and the regulations, and then you go, if you don't like what they're doing, you go to the courts. We're seeing that every day play out, and that's how that works.
Courts are making
onward and upward.
Courts are making me nervous these days, as they've probably made you in the past, I suppose, again. All right, so listener feedback. Again, if you want to provide listener feedback to Plain Talk Podcast, you can do so at 701-587-3141. This first one, I love the fact that Pat Finken is here to answer this question. Linda from Bismarck, in response to, we recently had North Dakota Newspaper Association talking about some polling that they'd done that show people really, really appreciate local news, and they'd pay for it. They'd pay more for it. And she says, from GNDC, the Greater North Dakota Chamber poll yesterday, it has less popularity for newspapers than maybe the North Dakota Newspapers Association. She's wondering why the two surveys would show such different results. Pat, I'm going to let you respond to this as somebody who's done a lot of public research in your days.
You can't compare these two. They're apples and oranges. One is an online poll that's voluntary participation in, and so you're only going to react to it if you are interested in the topic, and then it's limited in its exposure. So what this is kind of feedback to the membership of GNDC, but not necessarily reflective of the universe as a whole. The other one is not a voluntary sample. It's probably taken through some sort of where we interrupt the flow of a person's day. But even this poll in the past has only surveyed sometimes people that subscribe to the newspapers. So the bottom line is that the difference can be explained probably in terms of the way the sample is taken and where that sample comes from. But I'm not surprised by these different reactions to the polls, because of course they're asking two different groups of people that have different motivations. And the way to do this to get a true sense is you have to have some sort of a representative sample of the adult population as a whole if you really want to understand what's going on when it comes to local news.
Yeah, and I think, Pat, we both agree often polling is used to push a certain agenda. So looking at how the poll is conducted, how questions are asked is very, very important to know if it's reliable or not. And, the other thing that I think people forget, there's a plus or minus in polling. This is not an exact number. It gives you an idea of a snapshot in time. So the sample matters.
Oh, absolutely. Sample size. In fact, on a GNDC poll, I don't think you can even apply a margin of error because, of course, it's not randomized in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
So.
Right. Second text is from Andrew up in Minot, who is responding to the conversation. We alluded to it a little bit here today that Rob and I had regarding the city of Minot pulling out their membership from League of Cities over the Governor Armstrong's very popular property tax bill. It says, since you're looking for guest suggestions as a lifelong Minot resident, I'd like to hear from City Commissioner Samuelson about his motion to pull out of the League of Cities. That has been passed on to Rob, and Rob may be reaching out to City Commissioner Samuelson. So again, to leave us a voicemail or a text, you can reach us at 701-587-3141. Love the listener feedback. Follow us on TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, and X at Plain Talk ND. Looking forward to Friday's episode with Justin Kringstead, who's the executive director of North Dakota's Pipeline Authority. We hit a little bit of that with Governor Armstrong today, but pipeline's a big deal, important economic driver for the state. So with that, hey, Pat, thanks for hosting today. It's been fun.
It was a great discussion. You're right. We oftentimes are on opposite sides of equations, but it's always an educational and a rewarding conversation. So I appreciate the opportunity today.
I was given the opportunity to pick who my conservative co-host was, and I picked you because I thought there'd be some interesting conversation. So,
well, and now you may regret that because, of course, you couldn't get a word in edgewise. But that's it's your own fault then.
Yeah, it is my own fault, but here's the deal. We've had Drew Wrigley on the podcast before.
Oh, so never mind
that. We're right now checking if Drew listens to the podcast, see if we get a little feedback. So, all right. Thanks, Pat. Thanks, everybody, for listening.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
All right, see ya.
That's it for today on Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. Plain Talk is a production of Forum Communications Company. Got a question, comment, or suggestion? Leave us a voicemail or send us a text message at 701-587-3141. That's 701-587-3141. If you haven't subscribed to Plain Talk yet, you can find us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. For those of you who are already hooked, give us a rating or review. And don't forget to share or tell a friend. Special thanks to my co-host Chad Oban, and from myself and everyone at Plain Talk, thanks for listening.
Well, they're terrible, but at least they have no hope. So